We've been looking into iron farms for the past couple of weeks. There's a lot of different options out there, but we finally decided on one that we want to build. But we want to push it to the max. It's going to be a very big farm. It's going to take quite a while to build. I'm not even sure what all is going to be involved in it fully just yet, but what I am pretty sure is that we're probably not even going to start building it in this episode. Instead, this episode is going to be all about prep work. But I think there's some really cool things that we can do in this episode. For example, we need over 100,000 concrete for this build. It's a giant build. It's a lot of concrete. The thing behind me, this concrete maker I've got back there, it's probably in the 13 to 15,000 concrete per hour. So what is that? 6-8 hours of concrete making in order to make all that concrete? That's a long time to be standing around. I think it's going to benefit us quite a bit in the short term and in the long term. We can make a much faster concrete maker, and that's what I want to do. And I want to have it actually sort out the different colors, load them all fast as possible. Going to be a very cool machine, and that's what I want to focus on in this episode. But also, we're going to need about 1,000 villagers, over 1,000 villagers. It's going to be a very big iron farm. We're going to need a lot of villagers. So we're going to have to build a breeder. We want to get that started sooner than later because it's going to take a while for all those villagers to breed up. And that thing only holds about 400 villagers at a time. So it may take different cells. We might actually want to set up 2 breeders now that I'm thinking of it. And then the third thing is that we're going to need something to scare these villagers. And we're not exactly sure what we're going to use just yet. There are a few different options. The zombies are the obvious one. We could also use husk, which don't burn in sunlight. So that's kind of nice about them. We could use raiders, but we got to get rid of their crossbows. Or we could use zombie villagers. And I'm not sure which one we want to use. It depends on what's going to be the easiest. We need to get over 300 of them. So that's going to take a lot of work. So it depends on which the easiest. We might test it out. Let's see if we can actually get to at least testing out a few different options in this episode. But I think that's about as far as we're going to get. That's a lot to take on in one episode. So before we get started, I want to talk about mob heads. In my last jCraft episode, we built a mob head farm. And at the end of that episode, I talked about enabling the More Mob Heads data pack from Vanilla Tweaks. And as you can see, we have enabled that. I went around and killed a few mobs to make sure it was working, and I got a pig head and I got a gray horse head. So I've confirmed that it is working. So that is fabulous. That's going to be a lot of fun. I really think that's going to be a lot of fun. Some people mentioned in the comments, and thank you for mentioning this, I was not aware that Vanilla Tweaks actually does not adjust the rates for getting the skeleton, creeper, and zombie heads at all. So that's good to know. So these actually are kind of useful. So I've got, I'm going to save one of each of them so that we can put them in the museum because they're very cool. But the skeleton heads are a very cool decoration. I've already used one in my wizard tower. So those are going to be kind of fun. And then the creeper heads are the only way to get creeper banners that I'm aware of. So that's pretty cool as well. So I may actually use these heads because there's not actually any other way to use to get them. And then the zombie heads, not nearly as useful, but, you know, they might be useful from time to time. And then on top of the More Mob Heads data pack, Karma's been asking this for a little bit. I've added the statues book data pack. He wants to be able to use statues. I've asked that we minimize the number of invisible statues. I'm worried about the effects of lag that invisible statues might have, especially if you spam a lot of them. But if used with constraint, I think they're probably fine. And for the most fun, we're going to be able to do statues like, you know, with decorate them. The mob heads are going to be very helpful. We can use each other's mob heads because we can kill each other and then get our mob heads. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, that should be pretty cool. And it also actually gives us a use for all that leather we get from piglin trading because leather armor can be dyed just a whole bunch of different colors. So that's going to be fun as well. And one last thing that I've added is that wandering traders will now sell us the heads of my Patreons. So I think that's a pretty cool addition. We are not currently using the microblocks. We were using that on our Patreon server, and I haven't found it to be that interesting. I may change my mind on that, or the other players might really want the microblocks. We'll see what happens. But for now, they're just going to sell us the heads of Patreons. I think that'll be fun and a nice little benefit for the people who are my Patreons. And then at some point, I want to set up a hall of Patreons where I can actually put their heads up with a block behind them that represents the level that they support me at. I think that'd be a pretty cool and fun thing to do as well. And now that we have all these mob heads, I thought it'd be fun to turn it into a little game. So through the month of April, we're going to see who can collect the most number of unique mob heads. So there's a lot of different types of mob heads. For every different type that we collect, we each get 1 point. The person with the most points at the end of April wins. I guess bragging rights. There might be a prize at some point. We'll see what happens. It just seems like a fun game anyways. A reason to go around collecting mob heads. We can use them from armor stands, etc., etc. I'm not going to count the 3 mob heads that I got from the creeper farm because I don't think that's exactly fair. But anything we get from Vanilla Tweaks is fair game. So the game is on. So with that out of the way, let's talk about concrete. So I built this concrete maker a little while ago, and the maximum rate that a player can place blocks is 18,000 per hour. And I'm pretty sure this thing is not full speed. I actually think a lot of people have had trouble with the Ilmango blast chamber down here because it actually can't keep up with full speed items coming through. And I think mine is actually just a little bit slower, and that's why it's been able to keep up. And that's not necessarily a good thing. I think the convenience of not having to flip a switch to turn it on was kind of nice, but it meant that my concrete maker actually goes a little bit slower. So I've never really done a rate test for it, but I'd imagine it's somewhere in the 13 to 15,000. Now I could just go for a solid 18,000 per hour, but with Tweakaroo, we can actually use fast placement, and Techman88 has come out with a concrete maker that uses fast placement to place 44,000 concrete per hour. It's actually a pretty simple concrete maker. And then I went and made it super complex because I want to sort it out into the 16 different colors, and I want to shulker load it, and it's 44,000 per hour, which requires a 6x loader. So his simple machine is sitting on top of 16 6x loaders, and I want to build it here in my base because I like the convenience of being able to make concrete. I make concrete a lot. I like to accumulate the materials for a build ahead of time. So I'll go through, find all the materials, and if I'm missing concrete, then I like to be able to go straight over, make that concrete real quick. So it's be nice to have that in my base instead of having to go somewhere else. So this seems like a really good plot right here, and it's going to be a giant tower. We don't have any skyscrapers left in here. The cactus tower is going to go at some point, which reminds me I need to add a cactus farm to my list. That thing is miserably slow. So that thing is going to get replaced with a much faster cactus farm, and we'll just get rid of that. And that leaves 0 skyscrapers. That's the tallest building then. So maybe the wizard tower? Yeah. So this thing's just a giant stack of 16x loaders, 6x loaders, 16 of them. So it'll actually end up being taller than any other building. So I'm not going to build a building around it this episode, but I'd like to set up some space to make it a skyscraper. I want to do a really detailed skyscraper around it. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Just have a really cool looking skyscraper. So let's build a giant concrete factory. This is going to be fun.
Any ideas?
All right, there we go. That is a pretty big building, but like I said, the actual concrete maker itself isn't really that complex or that big or anything like that. So we go on up here, through this water elevator. That's how we get up to actually start making concrete. You can see this right here and this TNT duper. This is all that is involved with the concrete maker. Everything down here, this is just everything I added in order to handle the storage for all these items. So we'll go over that in a little bit. Let me actually show the concrete maker working. So when we flick this switch right here, there's just some pistons that go back and forth, and then the TNT duper will start operating. But what we can do is I've got this shulker box full of blue concrete powder. So we'll go ahead and throw that in there, and then we'll turn this on. We'll make sure we're in fast placement mode, and we'll start getting the items dropped down to me. And I just stand right here, and you notice my inventory isn't going up. It's just staying perfectly in line. So we will just stand here, and we're just placing a bunch of concrete. I said before that this makes 44,000 per hour. I was incorrect. It makes 48,000 per hour. Probably already corrected that on the video anyways, but I just wanted to mention it again. So this shouldn't take very long. All right, so I have placed all the concrete, but I only did 8 stacks. So the shulker loader is not going to be full. It's not going to be a full shulker box. So what I can do here is I've set up this additional system that lets me, this button right here will break any partially filled shulker boxes that are in the system. No matter where they are, it'll find all the partially loaded shulker boxes. And if I push that button, it'll break them and send them down to the storage. I did some testing with white earlier today, just making sure that everything was working. So in just a second, we should see, and I did some testing with light blue, and there's the blue that I did right there. And we had a few of them that stayed behind. They were actually stuck in there. So that's actually another important reason why we want to be able to break the partially loaded shulker boxes. Because even if I had done a full shulker box, I might have ended up a few short just because there's a few that get stuck behind in the system. It's possible we could lose 1 or 2. We tested over an extended period of time, and this does not lose many, or if any, concrete in the system, but it is possible. So I wanted a system that was capable of breaking all of the shulker boxes that were partially filled so that we can get those back if we need them. Now you may be wondering why I needed a new 6X loader. My sorting 6X loader seems like a perfect candidate for this machine. However, there's a small drawback for this that doesn't affect most of its uses, but for this specific machine, it doesn't make it a particularly good candidate. So if I put some items in here, then it will drain down here and into this dropper, and then when it's done, it will actually leave a small number of items in the dropper, and that will accumulate over time. Doesn't affect the rates of the loader at all, doesn't really affect much of anything, especially if you're using this for a farm that produces a lot of items. Who really cares if a small number of items end up left in the dropper and it accumulates over time? But if I'm using it for a concrete maker, it doesn't work particularly well. I don't want to start gradually losing more and more concrete. Now, this is actually a pretty common thing that happens. See, the nature of this is what I am doing is I'm using the actual sorter here to control when the clock goes on and off. And because there's a delay between this hopper and this dropper, when the clock stops, it hasn't ejected all the items out of the dropper just yet. It's just something that happens when you're trying to make nice compact 6X loaders. It's a fairly common byproduct. The 6X shulker box loader from the CCS Covenant Raid Farm has a similar issue, except that it actually requires that you fill up all the hoppers and droppers ahead of time. It actually takes about a half a shulker box of items to fill one of these up, so that if I use this, it would be a half a shulker box of every color of concrete would be required to fill up all these sorters. I've never really enjoyed that aspect of this particular loader, which is why I designed my sorting loader, but for this specific farm, it's much, much worse. So I have been working on this shulker box loader for a furnace array that we've been planning, because a furnace array has the same problem. You don't want to leave items behind from a furnace array. If you smelted a shulker box of items, you want to get a shulker box back, especially if it can't handle mixed items. You don't want to leave items behind in the dropper, and then that will screw up the shulker boxes and they won't break, and that would be very, very bad. So the difference here is that the comparator is actually on the dropper themselves, whereas most of the other more compact shulker loaders actually have the comparator on one of the hoppers up above. So that means if I put 16 items in this dropper, it will continue operating until that dropper is completely empty. It will never leave any items behind. It does make it a little bit bigger. It's not super big, but it is a little bit bigger, and it can't include a sorter. The sorter has to be separate because the sorter was used to power the clock. That's what made it actually integrated into the other one. So it's a little bit bigger, but it never leaves items behind. And so it's not an important feature for most choker box loaders, which is why a lot of them don't really care about that. But for this specific instance, and for our upcoming furnace array, it was something that I really valued. Now, this is still pretty compact, and the rule of thumb when you make something compact is that there's bound to be some sort of compromise that was made. And the compromise that I made here is that there's no protection from running out of shulker boxes. If you run out of shulker boxes, the system will break. If I had tried to add a system that did that, it would have been quite a bit bigger because it requires quite a bit of space in order to do that. And so a lot of my other shulker box loaders have protection from that. This one, unfortunately, does not, in order to make it more compact. And that is why I have added this wall of lights right here. And you can see there's a whole bunch of slime wire coming down from each of the different shulker box loaders. And so they're looking at one of the hoppers ahead of time. So make sure that it's got about 15 shulker boxes in the system. And if it doesn't, then the slime wire will depower and one of the lights will come off, and I will know at a glance that I'm running low on shulker boxes and I need to go in and fill them up. And then I've got this service door here that I can come up here and I can actually see at a glance, because they're not necessarily in the same order as they are up front. I can see at a glance which colors I'm looking at for each row. So if I come into this one, I can see these colors, etc. So that should make it, and then I would just load the shulker boxes. So I put 2 stacks of shulker boxes into each of these here. So yeah, seems to be working pretty all right there. So I think that covers everything with this machine. There's a lot going on here. There's the shulker box loaders, there's the sorters, there's the systems to break the partial shulker boxes, there's the water stream that brings the broken shulker boxes down into the chest over there, there's the filling system over here, there's the light system, and then of course there's the concrete maker way up there, dwarfed by this really big storage machine. But I think it's going to be really beneficial in the long term. So yeah, we got about 100,000 concrete to make, so I'm going to do that fairly soon. But before we do that, we should probably set up that breeder. So we've been back and forth a little bit on whether or not we need to set up a perimeter for this iron farm. And I don't think we do. At least I'm hoping we don't. I think it would benefit us a great deal more if we were keeping the iron farm loaded 24/7 than any random ticks that would be occurring in those chunks. If we got rid of that, it would benefit the whole server. But we're making an iron farm that's large enough that we don't need to keep it loaded all the time. So the random ticks that occur in those chunks will still have an impact, but I don't think it will be quite as bad. What would actually probably help us a little bit more is if we cleaned up spawn, like all the hopper spam that we've got going on at the Obsidian Bank. That will be loaded while we're running the iron farm, and that will hurt our performance at the iron farm. So that might be something that I need to prioritize fairly soon, but I think we can get away without using a perimeter. So that's the difference on where we want to put it. If we want to do a perimeter, then we need to do it over completely solid land so that we're not trying to dig a perimeter through ocean. If we don't need a perimeter, then we want to build it over an ocean so there's not like passive mobs, there's not nearly as many hostile mobs, especially if the AFK spot is high enough up. We only have to worry about a small number of drown. And I think we should probably also get rid of the kelp in order to keep that from random ticking and stuff like that. But I think that's our route. I think we want to find an ocean, and I think we want to make it kind of close, but kind of far away. I don't want it to be somewhere where we might randomly fly over and it'll just kill our frame rates. That would be bad. So I want it to be far enough away that we're not going to randomly fly over it, but close enough that it doesn't take us too long to get out there. So probably within about 1,000 blocks in nether coordinates. So let's see if we can find a good solid ocean that meets those requirements. And once we're there, we will start setting up the breeder. So this here is one of the biggest expanses of ocean I was able to find on our server. You can see there's a little bit of land just outside of view distance here. I don't know if that counts as being loaded, but we shouldn't have any passive mobs over there. And also nothing should spawn over there that's well outside of the spawning range. And then over here you see there's a small amount of islands over there. Again, I can't tell if they're within spawn range or whether they're loaded or not. Even if they are, It shouldn't have any passive mobs, shouldn't have anything spawning over there, again, well outside of range. And this is a warm ocean biome, so as you can see, there is not much kelp down there. There's a little bit of kelp over here, but in the actual warm ocean biome itself, there's not really much that can actually be random ticking. So we might want to actually remove the little bit of kelp and stuff like that. But one thing I have noticed is that we're sitting at over 10 MSPT with me just standing here. And on our creative server where we tested out the iron farm that we're going to build, we're sitting at 3 MSPT. And when it's running, it's at 47. So that's going to take us over 50 if we've got that extra 7, almost 8 MSPT. So there's definitely something we should probably try and do. I'm not sure. Me moving up into the world to keep spawns from happening down below, that might help a little bit. There's probably a couple of ticks happening here, but I think most of it is back at spawn. And so that is definitely something we should prioritize. But I think this is the ideal spot to set up on our iron farm. And so I've set up the initial breeder and the first section of my breeder. So we've just got a small breeder over here. We need to breed up to 28 villagers to fill this thing up. So I've just got a whole bunch of beds. And sorry, this is taking a second because I used slime blocks for scaffolding. And we've got an iron golem that spawned inside of... Where did it spawn? It spawned on that single block in there. I might have to put a button on that. I can't believe it spawned in there. All right, so besides that, we've got a decent number of villagers. We're getting there pretty quickly. So I got to wait for all these guys to breed up, and then I will start bringing them over into this. And also, I actually forgot about this. This is a very useful method for getting villagers to go somewhere. They will follow after these work stands, and they will take the most direct route. So if you got trapdoors like that, when I send them through the portal, they just jumped right in. They had no qualms at all. They just hopped right in there. So that was pretty cool as well. All right, that should be our 28 villagers here. All we got to do is load them up into this breeder over here. I went over this in quite a bit of detail in the video for this breeder right here, so I'm not really going to go over it here. It's a pretty simple concept. Let's just load up a rail, should get a villager, and he shouldn't end up popping right into there. So just got to do that 28 times. And there we go. I got all 28 villagers set up here. We've already started the breeding process. We should already have a few babies down here. Kind of hard to see. We can come down this way, I believe. Yep. Quite a few babies going on down there. I've set up the rest of the breeder. We've got one villager up here already. I've got a little micro farm so I can make more carrots. And so all I got to do is wait for a whole bunch of these guys to breed. But I think what I want to do is I want to set up another one of these. And it's not for more villagers. It's actually going to be for zombie villagers. Because if I can get about 300 villagers in one cell and then just throw a zombie in with them, I think that's going to be the easiest way to actually get zombies, something that'll scare the villagers. So zombie villagers work just as well as anything else. And I think they're going to be the easiest to get. We are going to still have to name tag them all, but I might be able to throw a bunch of heads in there with them. We'll see what happens. But let me set up a second breeder and get that one loaded up as well. All right, so that is 2 breeders running full force. This one's actually got a decent number of villagers already. And I even took a whole bunch to supply this breeder. And this one's just getting started, but we should have a decent number. That's actually quite a lot of babies that are going on there. So this is going to be a real lag factory sometime real soon. So I've got my work cut out for me between episodes. I'm going to breed up as many of these guys as I can. And I'm going to also try and set up all that concrete using my new concrete factory. So a lot of AFK tasks mostly. Just got to stand around, wait for villagers to breed. Just got to stand around and place a bunch of concrete. And while I was working on that, I actually accumulated quite the number of heads. We got the pig head and the gray horse head that I had before. And then Asta and I actually set up all the workstations and killed 2 of each villager. So Asta has all these heads as well. So we've got 1 of each villager type. And then I've got a couple of iron golems that got in my way while I was building that breeder. So I ended up with a few of their heads. A couple of unemployed villagers that didn't do what I wanted them to. A couple heads there. And then I actually spent some time at the raid farm. I was testing out something. And so I've got every type of head. These witch heads are actually pretty hard to come by because they're a little bit rare. And then your inventory fills up so quick. So like you have to have a clear spot in your inventory for the witch head. So if it comes after your inventory is already full, which is like 3 seconds into using the raid farm, you don't get a witch head, so you'd have to get it some other way. But I managed to get witch heads from the actual raid farm, and then I got a drown farm, and then I got a couple of cat heads that we're not going to worry about where those came from. But yeah, I'm already off to a really good start. That is, I am definitely winning right now. I know nobody's got nearly that many heads, and this is all the extra heads that I got from using the raid farm. Look at how many, they just end up with so many heads. These might be useful for like villager zombies. We can give them these heads and they'll look silly and it will keep them from despawning. So it's a little bit easier than name tags. So yeah, Asta, Carm, it's your move. How many heads can you get? So that's all I have for you today. I want to thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode and I hope to see you again real soon. Bye now. Let me get the giggles out first. Okay, I think I got it. Hold on. I gotta do this clip with a straight face. It's gonna be hard. In my last jCraft episode, nope, they're still there. Maybe if I don't look at the screen.